Community Matters.
Hello and welcome to Many Voices, One Community, stories across Long Island and beyond. I am so very pleased to be here. As many of you know, I'm honored to serve as the Community Engagement Officer here at the Holocaust Center, and I am especially pleased to be the host of this wonderful podcast and to have today Father Papadopoulos, or as he's more often known in the community, Father P. I just wanted to say, so pleased to have you here. I want to talk a little bit about the Greek festival. I know it just happened, but I feel like that's where, more than anything else, I've really gotten to know you, although I have been to your church several times. And as mentioned before we started the broadcast, the point of this, of Many Voices, One Community, is to learn about each other and how we work to find the common thread. And the common thread of goodness, not the common thread of the evil, wicked, horrible things that are sadly in our world and that are too easily empowered. So why don't we begin? Why don't you just share a little bit about yourself and how this young man from Connecticut, right? Is that right?
That's right.
Ended up being the priest of one of our more vibrant congregations here on Long Island.
You're very, very kind. Thank you, Gaitley, for this introduction. Thank you for having me on the show. Of course, it's an honor. It's a pleasure. It's wonderful to be with people within the community who do a lot of good. And so I commend all of your work and the network to really promote the things that we really want to see develop. It's kind of like what I say to my young adults. This cliche that they say, the grass is greener on the other side.
Right.
I always tell them that's very wrong. The grass is greener wherever you water it.
Oh, that was beautiful.
So what does that mean? I mean, if we're watering the good things in our community, what's going to grow? It's the good things that are going to grow. And if you water the bad things, then you have a consequence of that. So really, thank you for having me on the show. Yes, our Greek festival was quite a festival.
And I want to add, if I could. So this past Tuesday, I was in Port Washington.
Okay.
And as you may know, I'm president of a Tribute and Honor Foundation, which honors our veterans. And
Beautiful.
There was a group of veterans there from their American Legion post. Okay. And I said, so nice to meet you guys. And if you could, we're going to do a group photograph and this and so. And they said, are you that guy who did the Greek festival thing? So, and I'll tell you, I think we were up to like 6,000 hits. And just so you all know, I have a tendency sometimes to show up. I have another broadcast I do. And what I appreciate, Father Papadopoulos, Father P, is that you're always open to that. And not only that, you are so at home. I mean, there are two things that happened here. One, it was get to the festival, get your kids off their devices, get your kids off the internet, get them here to connect. And I love that. But at the same time, you were certainly at home and able to use that in a good way.
That's right.
And that's how I feel about it. I feel like if there's an opportunity, it doesn't cost anything to really bring people to an event. And one, I know we talked about hospitality.
Oh, yes.
I'm going to come back to that because at that festival, and I love this when we have homegrown events here on Long Island.
That's right.
That the warmth and the joy and the fun was just incredible. So how long has that been going on? And tell me just a little bit about that, and then we'll dive in a little deeper.
Okay. I just got assigned to the church here in the Glen Cove, Brookville area just 5 years ago. The festivals probably are trademarks of every Greek community. Greeks like to feed people. It's a sign of their hospitality and their love for the food and the culture and all that good stuff, which is so nice, right? I mean, a gyro, souvlaki, or whatever everyone kind of knows. Baklava, cheese pie, spinach pie. So at this site down at Garvey's Point, I think it's been the last 3 years. Kind of because our church underwent a kind of huge expansion project, which precluded us from having kind of like what we used to have the festival on campus. Now we had to move it off campus. And the city has been tremendously good to us. I think part of what you just kind of said in passing was, how do we continue to foster those homegrown community, because our church started in downtown Glen Cove.
Right, I knew that. I knew that history.
48 years ago or so. We're coming up on our 50th anniversary. So coming back to kind of like our roots to offer that kind of hospitality was kind of neat as an imagery for us. And we hope it continues, from the mayor, everyone's been really, really supportive, and our people definitely get excited about it. And
I think, what a wonderful thing for us here on the North Shore to have it. What a great thing. I will say I have been to your church twice.
Okay.
And one of those, and it's Church of the Holy Resurrection, correct?
Correct.
So, and I always think about it because I go Cedar Swamp Road and hang a left going to Huntington. And,
That's right.
And right there, I was headed to Huntington yesterday, and I thought of you all. But I've been there twice, and one of those was a memorial service for Teddy, of course, his wife.
Yes.
And that was, and I will say, just such a beautiful sanctuary. I don't know the Greek. I don't know if there's a different terminology
sanctuary.
for it.
It is the sanctuary.
I think of Morgan Park as being my sanctuary. but I will just solace. The great. And then the other one, a good friend of mine. I don't know if you know Reverend Juanita Lopez. She's at Iglesia Ciudad de Refugio.
I feel like I've met her.
Yeah, I bet you have. Yeah. She is. But she and her husband, who's now deceased, but they had. I think they used your hall for their anniversary celebration. And so I have, like, from one, all spiritually filled and just a beautiful thing, but just really such a positive, and what an incredible church you have, and what a community you have here on Long Island.
It's definitely, we may make mention of that in a few minutes, but, my previous life.
Right.
Gately was much different than my current last 5 years.
So
life.
I was going to say, I'd like to kind of visit that. Okay. So if we can trot down that path,
sure.
How you came to where you are, and how you see your work impacting not only your congregation, but the fuller community.
Yeah.
How does it make a difference?
I mean, I was born and raised in Norwalk, Connecticut. My parents had come from Greece. My father arrived in 1970. My mother came a little younger. Long story short, they ended up in Norwalk, Connecticut. 2 older brothers went to Fairfield University. For a period of time, I was thinking of combining, because my Saint Panteleimon was a doctor. I thought about combining the priesthood with the medical profession, but met my wife young. In our tradition, we're allowed to marry. My father told me, you can't carry 2 watermelons in one arm, so you need to decide. And I always, from as young as I can remember, I wanted to be a priest. From as young as I can remember,
wow,
I don't have a childhood memory of, and I didn't have a vision of an angel or any kind of like experience or anything that would be supernatural. Nothing. It was the most natural thing for me was to desire to become a priest. At that point, upon graduating, I went to seminary in Holy Cross Greek Orthodox School of Theology in Brookline, Massachusetts.
Right, okay.
The only Greek Orthodox seminary in the country. And upon graduation, that's where the biggest turn of my life took, because I was this little homegrown boy from Norwalk, Connecticut, from immigrant parents. And 2-3 weeks before graduation, my wife and I have a visit. And it's at that time what they call the archdeacon, the deacon who follows around the Archbishop of America, which is a national post, right? And the national headquarters are in downtown Manhattan. So the deacon walks up and says, what are your plans after graduation? I go, my wife and I have been discussing maybe going to Greece, cultivate my Greek language skills and maybe some of my musical skills. Well, how about serving in the office of the Archbishop? I was like, whoa, is that a directive? Is that an invitation? What is it? He goes, take it whatever way you want. So I went home, spoke to my wife. She's like, if the church is calling you, you can't walk away. This is what we've been taught, right? So sure enough, in 2001, I go to the national headquarters, 8 East, 79th Street, Upper East Side, Manhattan. And I lived 19 years of my life as a deacon, which was the longest, I don't say pridefully, but it was the longest serving deacon in the history of the Archdiocese consistently. We had deacons who were many years younger, but they weren't situated at the Archdiocese day in, day out. And I served under Archbishop Demetrius, who's formerly of America. He retired in 2019. He visits the church often. He comes to Brookville quite often. He's 97.
Wow.
But still sharp as a tack. So in 2001, I have this invitation to serve at the Archdiocese. And frankly, that's where my whole life takes a turn. Because at that point, I'm put onto a airlift that I'm traveling all across the United States and all across Europe and into countries and into White Houses and you name it. So, I mean, I met 7 presidents, right?
Wow.
Which is kind of unique. That's always my fun fact. When I'm in groups, I'm like, fun fact. Who here met 7 presidents?
Right.
They weren't all sitting presidents, obviously. I'm not that old.
So I was going to say, coming up, so everybody knows I've got another podcast with Evelyn Candell, who is she served during the Korean War, and she was on a postage stamp. So everybody's got their own. But 7 presidents is pretty impressive.
It was a very neat. So I was a fly. I met 3 popes. I traveled to Turkey, where in Constantinople is our, let's say, spiritual center worldwide. Our ecumenical patriarch, Bartholomew, and the patriarchate, the ecumenical patriarchate that's there. So accompanying the Archbishop. I've been probably to Istanbul probably 40 times, 45 times.
Right.
So, and that kind of also, you can imagine as a young seminarian coming out from a young little town, a small little town in Norwalk, this was like incredibly overwhelming to me.
Right.
I didn't even know how to travel, I didn't know anything.
Right.
And certainly those experiences deeply shaped my priesthood, right? And deeply shaped my life. Going to Israel, visiting, different sites there, the Holocaust, and just kind of learning, I would say, Gaitley, from the inside, especially who was Emmons being the age he was, lived through occupations, lived through world wars, lived through. So all of that collective kind of activity really shaped the thinking and really formed, I can say, who I am, if I'm anything. Definitely had a tremendous impact on my life. And it was definitely eye-opening going into countries that are suffering, and Estonia and Latvia and around the Baltic Sea, and being at the Vatican and seeing kind of ecumenical, if you will, dialogue at the highest level.
Right.
There's nothing higher than a pope.
Right.
I remember Pope John Paul II, one of the highlights, if I may share with the listeners.
Sure, please do.
Was, here I am, this little deacon of, I'm 24 at the time, 25, and we visit the Vatican, and St. John Paul II was alive at the time, and we're invited to have lunch with the Pope. So I don't even know what's going on. I'm just walking through these walls.
How do you have lunch with the Pope?
I'm like, you're right. What is going on? So we get into a room, and there's 9 of us. There's the 4 of our delegation, the Pope, and 4 of his workers. And a very nice moment was one of his assistants says, Your Holiness, Deacon Panteleimon is a married deacon. And the Pope turned and nodded and was very, very gracious. And then 5 minutes later, I have a tap on my shoulder, and there's rosaries and crosses and this and that. And the priest says, His Holiness would like for you to take this to your family and to your children.
Beautiful.
Mind you now, all of my Catholic friends were like, Father, you have to get us something from the Pope, right?
Oh, yes.
So I came back as a hero. I had all these gifts to give, right? Wow. I kept, of course. He gave me a beautiful cross. Going into Turkey, going into a country that's secular,
right?
But that minarets 5 times a day or whatever their call to prayer is, and living that experience and seeing the Vatican in the ultimate kind of, let's call it glory, and going to the other ancient church, the church of the, of the Byzantine, Empire and the East, and the contrast.
Right.
So now it's like constant pressure, constant, perseverance,
Right.
seeing our ecumenical patriarch not have the freedoms that are elementary, that are self-understood in a country like United States, right? So that shaped your perspective, the church in captivity, or the church, the suffering church.
Right.
Not that the Vatican doesn't have its own struggles, not saying it like that, but I'm saying that was an eye-opener on a kind of world platform.
Sure.
And then on that high level, being in the meetings of prime ministers, visiting,
Right.
like I said, Israel, seeing those conflicts and that's so...
Right. If I can interject,
Yeah, of
I think
course.
in terms of, this day and age and where we are, and the turmoil in so many corners of our world happening right now. And, I've been at the Holocaust Center since October, so I'm kind of new to the center here. But there are so many things that I see when the young people are here, or there's a group of nurses here, or people from every walk of life and every faith and every background. And the stories of, we often talk about the upstanders, the people who stood up, the people who didn't say, oh, this is, we're going to do what we're just told to do. But the people who stood up for, certainly during the Holocaust, during a horrible time in our history.
Stood up for
and so
human
many
beings.
from the Catholic faith, from so many different backgrounds. And, from my vantage point, they did what was right and what was good. And, I grew up a Methodist. I'm now a Presbyterian, attend predominantly or a historically black church, Calvary AME Church. But I feel like we learn so much from each other. And to me, the big lesson is what is good and how you care for one another. And, even if our faiths are different, our backgrounds are different, and granted there are evil, wicked thinking out there, but most of our religions, most of our faiths, if you look at the heart of it, really have good things. And I feel like that is of such value. And I would say, how does your theology and your background, how does that help empower people to make a difference in the full community, whatever one's faith, whatever one's background? How does that empower people to make a difference?
See, I think you touch upon a lot of things, Gaitley, that we could probably have 15 shows to talk about, right? But in a fundamental way, we believe every human being is made in the image and likeness of God. That's a biblical reference of the Old Testament. Every human being, therefore, has to be treated with the full measure of goodness and kindness. And those people who stood up, the stander-uppers, as you mentioned them, what comes to mind is, I remember our Archbishop Demetrius telling me the story, in Thessaloniki, where he was from, in the north city in Greece, there were 31 synagogues.
Wow.
Before World War II, and 2 daily newspapers that were Jewish newspapers, one in French, one in Spanish. He said, and Zakai, who was in my class, showed up one day, and he had the yellow indication here, and then they gathered everyone, and it was done. In Athens, the Archbishop, Damaskinos, these religious people who stood up, Damaskinos was summoned by the Germans and told that you have to, by tomorrow, submit to me the names, together with the chief of police, all the names of all the Jews of Athens. And he said, no problem. In the morning, they handed the list. There were 2 names, his and the chief of police. And they said to him, Archbishop, you will be put before a firing squad. Oh, he says, no. In the tradition of the church, clergy are always hung. They're not shot. So you have to hang me. That kind of world boldness in the face of hate, wow, that comes around, I don't know how often. Right. And it's kind of like the only antidote, if you will, to have that kind of boldness to stand for what is right. to put it all on the line, because obviously they could have killed them on the spot.
Right.
In that case, and that's not the only. It's a whole plethora, I'm sure, of unsung heroes. In the island of Zakynthos alone, not a single Jew was killed. All of the Greeks of the island hid them all,
Right.
in basements, whatever. And then that's like, wow, who would do that today, knowing that right outside your door you're at a threat? So, in all faiths, I do believe. I don't think there's any faith that would say go out and hurt someone. I just don't. You can't embrace that, and I don't care who you are.
Right.
And this kind of real humility when it comes to looking at the world. Because what did I do, Gaitley, to be born what I was born? What did you do to be born what you were born? And what did anyone get? We can say it's arbitrary, but nonetheless, it's not so arbitrary, because God has a plan. But why did He put us all here?
Yes, and I think in terms of, I talk to a lot of people about your set of gifts and challenges.
Well,
your set, what you've got and what you don't have, and sometimes what you don't have is your strength.
right.
It's what it
And
takes
also,
to overcome.
why the diversity?
Right,
Because then nobody would have need of anyone.
right,
So the fundamental, I think, Gaitley, the fundamental thought that needs to be cultivated in the minds of modern humanity worldwide is that we all need each other in the end of the day. There's no such thing as a luxury. I'll just make my little enclave here. And that's the most radically or counter-human attitude of all.
right.
Because any species, I was a biologist, double major, any species turned to itself will die. It'll suffocate and die.
Right.
So any community, any group turned only onto itself will suffocate and die eventually.
Right.
And so for us, the message is constantly that you have to be able to see in the other person an icon of yourself, because you are connected in the grand scheme of things. We could say humanity. And this is really the elevation of the thoughts, the nous, we would say, right? The elevating factor is that being able to see in the faces of the people,
Right.
your own. These are my brothers and sisters.
Yes.
If you can't get there, then I'm afraid that first, you're not fully human yet. That would be my humble, and I stand to be corrected. The listeners can correct me. This is my humble submission here.
And you see, we are Humanity Matters. This is Bernie's brainchild, who is the public relations person here, also one of the vice presidents of the.
And this is a clever title.
It is a clever
Humanity
title.
Matters.
Yes.
Is it the content of things that have happened, the matters that have happened, or is it
right?
that they
that's
that
good.
they matter?
Right?
So,
no.
very clever.
No, but it is. So that's Bernie. That's all. Bernie's
And isn't
doing.
it true, though, Gaitley, we could argue, too, that any nation's, community's perspective and ideal or ideas about the person will be absolutely reflected in how they treat that person.
Yes. Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
So-
absolutely. I think about, for me, I feel like oftentimes there's such a push for thinking exactly the same.
Right.
We've got to exactly all think the same. And I think, oh my, what kind of world would that be? I feel like it is the gift when you have an opportunity, yes, to see that common thread, yes, to find the goodness in people, yes, everybody wants, good families and good homes and educations for their kids and not to be hungry. Let's just talk
Safety.
for a minute, the basic stuff.
Food, shelter, safety.
But, as far as how much richer life is when we know each other and when we have that gift.
I want to say this, too. Even in quote, what I do day to day, I can assure you, Gaitley, when I walk into a Whole Foods or whatever the case,
right?
People of every walk of life will say, Father, can you say a prayer for my kid? Father, can you say a prayer for my marriage? They're not Christians, let's say, any person, right? And I can probably guarantee, I wish I had the statistics to say that I'm certain that parents out there all are struggling with the same things. Kids with, device addiction, the statistics on addiction to pornography, the incredible exponential rise in online gambling among teenagers. These are the issues that universally, I'm willing to wager a lot of money, are all the same issues that every parent out there. So if nothing connects you, then the common pains that we all have can definitely bring us together. Like, who wants kids going to sleep hungry? Who wants kids addicted to their devices where they lose their personhood?
Right.
Lost in, and I was listening to other statistics this morning online, staggering, frightening things. You know, the second highest cause of death among 10 to 14-year-olds in the United States is suicide.
Yes.
Like, you read that and it's terrible. So we have work to do.
Yes, we do have work to do. And I will say, Father P, the more we have people like you who are working to combat that wherever it happens, the better we are as a community.
Thanks be to God.
And I cannot thank you enough for being with me today. Again, this was Many Voices, One Community, and certainly, Father P, you are about one community and bringing us together.
Absolutely.
Thank you all so very much. Please follow all the other podcasts here at HMTV, at HMTC, and thank you so very much. Thank you, Father P.
Thank you, Gaitley. All the best.